Hello class and professor, my name is Ian Garcia and I will be presenting my information on multilingualism and its cognitive advantages and disadvantages. Now first I would like to get into the general information of what multilingualism is and to not get it confused with bilingualism. Now multilingualism is the acquisition of multiple languages other than your L1, whereas bilingualism is simply just one L1 and one L2. Now, in this study, I will be referencing multilingualism, however, it will be in conjunction with bilingualism, as these studies do pertain to both. Now, simultaneous multilingualism is acquisition of more than one language during early childhood, whereas sequential multilingualism is learning additional languages after the L1 has already been established. Now, in all of these studies, which I will provide in the next couple of minutes, will all be provided due to sequential multilingualism, which is, of course, learning the L2 after the L1 has already been understood. Now, I would like to begin with some facts that discuss how 43% of the population is bilingual. And now, Spanish happens to be the popular second language to learn within the United States besides English. And in these studies, Spanish will be the tested language that is provided. Now, there is a notion to consider that by the Greeks, which explained that multilingualism was training the mind. And as we can see through the book, that cognitive effects of bilingualism/multilingualism appear relatively early in the process of becoming multilingual, and do not require high levels of bilingual proficiency nor the achievement of balanced bilingualism. And now with this, I would like to explain the correlation between the two studies in which I will provide and the book. Now we can see that within the book, they state that bilingual children show consistent advantages in both verbal and nonverbal abilities, as well as bilingual children showing advantages in metalinguistic abilities, specifically manifested in their control of language processing. Another one stated is that bilingual children have advantages in the use of language for verbal mediation. Now all of these will be explained in detail provided by other case studies. However, I would like to begin with an introduction of what exactly we will be discussing. And now some of the negatives associated with bilingualism is that there is evidence that simultaneous bilingualism in children may result in a narrower range of lexical development in either language, as well as intensive and continued use of the L2 may reduce accessibility in the L1. And now I chose this topic to be my research project as I am very fascinated by other languages and myself am a quadrilingual with the intention of learning a couple more languages, and this definitely does pertain to me. Now in the case study by Victoria Marion titled The Cognitive Benefits of Bilingualism, she highlights some positive and negative advantages in becoming a bilingual. Some of the positives associated with bilingualism was a stronger inhibitory control, which allows for a better ability to ignore competing perceptual information and focus on the relevant aspects of the input. Now, in layman's terms, this just means a stronger ability in multitasking. We also see in older bilinguals that they have a slower memory and executive control decline, which could also be related towards fighting against Alzheimer's. As well as these effects, we also see better metalinguistic awareness, which helps in learning more languages on top of what is known, as well as understanding one's own language. Now, some of the negatives associated with bilingualism found in this study was that it leads to co-activation in lexical mapping due to the brain's inability to separate different lexical items with similar phonological intake. For example, in this study, there was a marker placed on the table as well as a stamp. Now the example was with a English and Russian multilingual, and the question was if marker is in English and marka refers to stamp in Russian, which item will the user look at first? And now in this study they found that it caused cognitive strain and slower identification of lexical items, which related to extra processing when looking for lexical correlations of the L2, and this also creates tip-of-the-tongue situations. However, due to the brain's plasticity and ability to adapt, this extra work does allow for stronger control over which language is being spoken or heard, which again ties into the benefits of multitasking. And now, in the second study done by Sabra Palahim, titled The Cognitive Advantages and Disadvantages in Early and Late Bilinguals, we see more evidence supporting these cognitive aspects, and it brings into the question of if the time of L2 acquisition plays a role in these cognitive advantages and disadvantages. Basically saying, if I were to learn my L2 at a later date, would I still be affected the same way as early bilinguals? And now, in a performed lexical task, early bilinguals' use of two languages resulted in lexical access deficits in both languages due to their having access to words of each language less frequently than monolinguals. And when compared to late bilinguals, they see no differences in between early and late bilinguals in naming their dominant language, as well as no difference in early and late bilinguals naming their non-dominant language, which means that regardless of activation time, you are affected the same way. Now, in the attention task, they did notice that late bilinguals had a slower time as opposed to early bilinguals, which states that the earlier you learn the second language, the better you will be with your multitasking abilities. And now, to tie all these concepts together, in conclusion, when we weigh the cognitive advantages and disadvantages of multilingualism, and we come to discover that the benefits far outweigh the negative aspects, as well as discover that the one cognitive disadvantage noticed and highlighted in both of these studies becomes reduced over time as, again stated, the brain's plasticity learns to adapt, which is also assisted by the multilingual advantage of metalinguistic knowledge. Thank you for listening to my presentation on multilingualism and its cognitive advantages and disadvantages.